now.
Because sir, you can start.
Okay. So, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to see the whole Indore study circle today. And our speaker today is Mr. Michael Krohnen. I want to extend a very warm welcome to Michael for accepting our invitation and being with us this morning. Michael is going to talk to us about J. Krishnamurti's life and work. Are the two inseparably connected? He has also circulated a synopsis. I'll just read it. Krishnamurti, throughout his life, de emphasized the personal aspects and events of his life and sought to set human beings absolutely, unconditionally free. This endeavor required him to focus on the psychological aspects and challenges of everyday human consciousness, which he explored profoundly and with a very practical approach. He urged each one of us to find the truth for himself or herself, pointing out that no one can give it to you, not even he. At the same time, his long personal life appeared like a wonderful fairy tale. I'm sure most of us know Michael because he has spoken to us even earlier. But for those of us who are joining for the first time, I'll briefly introduce Michael to you. Mr. Michael Krohnen was born in Germany at the end of World War II and grew up near Düsseldorf in northwest region of the Rhine River. He graduated from high school, earning his baccalaureate in 1964, and immigrated to the United States the following year. He lived and attended college in Los Angeles, discovering and being fascinated by the mostly Asian religious traditions like Hinduism, Buddhism, Zen, Taoism, Islam, and Judaism. He chanced upon some writings by J. Krishnamurti which fascinated him profoundly. In 1967, he traveled overland to India for the first time, exploring the various religious centers, temples, and monuments. While in Almora, UP, now in Uttarakhand, staying with a disciple of Ramana Maharshi, in 1969 he learned that J. Krishnamurti was still alive and presented public talks in several locations. Michael was fortunate to have his first live encounter with Krishnaji in Chennai in 1971 January at a dialogue event of Krishnaji with younger people. This so deeply moved him that he endeavored to hear Krishnaji speak wherever he could in India at the various locations like Rishi Valley, Bangalore, Mumbai, Varanasi, Chennai, and Delhi. In Europe, where he volunteered at the Brockwood Park School and in Sarnen, Switzerland, and then also in United States, Santa Monica, Ohio, and San Francisco. He continued following K to these various locations for 4 to 5 years. It was in 1975 that he was given the position of a cook at the newly founded Oak Grove School in Ohio. During Krishnaji's regular stay in California from February through May, he prepared lunchtime meals for Krishnaji and his guests at the Arya Vihar property, now the Pepper Tree Retreat. All of this, even though he was not a trained chef, but had to learn the culinary art from zero, but with the help of some great specialists. He pursued this activity for 11 years until shortly after K's passing in 1986. Subsequently, he wrote a book about his time with K, which was also published by Penguin India, The Kitchen Chronicles 1001 Lunches with J. Krishnamurti. Currently, Michael works as the librarian of the Krishnamurti Library in Ohio, California. With these words, I welcome Michael once again and request him to please begin your talk. After Michael's talk is over, we'll have some comments from Professor Krishna, Harshji, Dr. Gajanan Rao, and maybe Harshad Bhai, and then there'll be question answers. So, Michael, it's all yours now. Please unmute yourself. Unmute yourself. Michael, you have to unmute. Hit the unmute button. Yes.
Okay, good.
Good.
Thank you very much, dear Jipati Dubey. That's very kind of you to present me, even though some of it is already quite well known to some of you. And my subject, of course, concerns itself with Krishnaji's life and his work, meaning his teachings. And my first question is, or my first consideration is, how have we, meaning all of us, how have we come to discover Krishnamurti? And why has he appealed to us through what he says? Because I suppose most of us have heard him or read him or learned something about him, and then going into it, so to speak, became more fascinated by it. And I mean, in a way, what Mr. Dubey was reading described accurately how I became involved, because I grew up in Germany as a Christian, as a Catholic, and I had as a young person, I had a very religious consciousness. But later, growing up as a young person, as a teenager, when the questioning starts, this belief system of Christianity didn't stand up to questioning. So I became what you might call an agnostic. But by the same token, coming to America and discovering these other world religions that seemed fascinating and very practical, that stimulated me and intrigued me. And then, actually here, I want to show you this. This is the book that first, it's actually a book by Dinesh Waghmare. You can see that. It's called Krishnamurti and the Experience of the Silent Mind. Now, that's the first time I ever heard the name Krishnamurti. But what intrigued me more than anything else was the suggestion of the silent mind, because I had become very aware of the chattering of the mind in everyday life, how it is constantly turning itself on. And so I became interested, and then I was fortunate, because going to India, discovering Hinduism, the temples, and living up near the Himalayas was fascinating. And then coming upon Krishnamurti, who says some extraordinary things. And the question for me, of course, is now then getting to know Krishnamurti closer, since here in Ojai from 1975 on, I was his chef. And so I got to meet, he was 3 months out of the year. And so I had constant contact, daily contact with him and Mrs. Zimbalist, who was his hostess here. And he was very, you see, I noticed that from a lot of other people that hear him speak or even watch his tapes of the YouTube tapes of him giving a particular talk. Often they see him as very austere, as very strict and accusatory even, and he is sometimes, he comes across like that. But now to see him in an everyday position was something quite different, because it turned out he was he was very modest, very shy even, and not self-assertive, and really, and at the same time, I should add, which was something actually that moved me in the first place too, was this extraordinary presence. Those of you who met him and knew him and interacted with him, you know there was this subtle presence there that communicated an extraordinary energy. At least for me, that was the case. And so often, he would, how should I say, he would emphasize that his personal life, don't get involved in the person, in the image, don't create an image and authority. Just listen to what he says, and take it from there, meaning, observe your life, look at your own consciousness. And actually, I mean, there are some statements that he made which are just so striking. Actually, here, I'd like to present one of these to you, which really seem to capture most strikingly the essence of what he was trying to convey to people. And it's from the book called Krishnamurti's Journal, which came out, I guess, in 1975 or 6. And no, actually 1982, as I say. But the entries are all from 1973. So this entry is from September. I only read a small portion of it. September 24th, 1973. One has to be a light to oneself. This light is the law. There is no other law. All the other laws are made by thought, and so fragmentary and contradictory. To be a light to oneself is not to follow the light of another, however reasonable, logical, historical, and however convincing. You cannot be a light to yourself if you are in the dark shadows of authority, of dogma, of conclusion, and so on. So, so this is a very powerful statement, which seems to express his intention to set men absolutely unconditionally free. But now I'd like to get to the next thing. And so one hears Krishnaji, or one discusses with him, and one is struck by what he said, by the clarity of what he said. And yet, by the same token, one may not be able immediately to put into action what he suggests. One may be even puzzled by the language. A lot of people are puzzled by the language, And so this question then arises, which is very normal and usual. People say, who is this man? Who is this J. Krishnamurti? How did he get to be in this position? And then, of course, then you look it up and you go, well, at that time, when I first met him, there weren't these personal computers, so you couldn't easily look it up. But then, once I was here, there were various biographies written about him and about what he did and how he came to be what he, a speaker around the world, a great, well, often it's hard to categorize him and to name it. He was a great spiritual teacher. But people became very, very curious about him, And that happened, of course, very early on. If you go back to some of these documents or books, you see that already, in the before World War I or in the 20s, he was headline material. He was headline material, and well, it affected him because in a way he had a very shy, modest side to him. And so that's why he said, well, don't concern yourself with the person, listen to what this man says. And here, there are a few, I hope you don't mind if I bring this up. There are a number of books, they are not that well known anymore, but they're quite dated. And one of these books, and I chanced upon that, is called God is My Adventure, which is a book by Rome Landau. And this is in the 30s, oh no, he goes actually back into the 20s even. He was looking around for a true teacher, and he went to see Ospiensky, Gurdjieff, Rudolf Steiner, and so on. But then he also chanced upon Krishnamurti. And he was very impressed by Krishnamurti, which is actually an interesting thing. I have that, I read that in many of the books, that people, they were just taken in by this unusual young, at that time he was still young, of course, this presence, he entered the room and people stopped and looked and asked, who is this person, And so here, Rome Landau wrote this book in which he describes his lengthy meetings with Krishnamurti, including in Brockwood. He goes all the way in 1970 or so, 71, he meets Krishnaji in Brockwood. And he comes to ask a question which you might call personal, because he says, how did you come to that state of unity with everything? Now, according to him, I'm going to read this little passage to you. According to Rome Landau, Krishnaji answered in this way: people have asked me about it before, and I always feel that they expect to hear the dramatic account of some sudden miracle through which I suddenly became one with the universe. Of course, nothing of the sort happened. My inner awareness was always there, though it took me time to feel it more and more clearly. And equally, it took time to find words that would all describe it. It was not a sudden flash, but a slow yet constant clarification of something that was always there. It did not grow as people often think. Nothing can grow in us that is of spiritual importance. It has to be there in all its fullness. And the only thing that happens is that we become more and more aware of it. It is our intellectual reaction and nothing else that needs time to become more articulate, more definite. So I thought that was a very interesting comment by Krishnaji, because often, you may remember, actually, Mark Lee just wrote a book. You may have heard of, seen it. It's called Krishnamurti's Process, Probing the Mystery. And we all have heard of what happened when Krishnaji first came to Ojai in 1922. He had these bizarre happenings, and they continued for, well, pretty much the rest of his life in various forms. And that was often seen by some people. Well, for one, he was also sitting under the pepper tree, which reminded people of the dear old Buddha under the Bodhi tree, people Bodhi tree, and also thinking, oh yeah, he was in 1922, he was 27 years old, and he reached enlightenment as he was sitting there, and so on. And of course, as he himself testifies, that was not the case. It was always there. And of course, if you look more closely, and a lot of people ask these questions, and sometimes he would answer them or go into them with close friends and trustees and so on, And Harsh may probably know and testify to that, And so here, I'm not going to read any of this to you, but here's something. It's a transcript. It's about how many pages it is. I don't know, page 40, 30 or 40, and it's a question and answer session that happened in Ojai between Krishna Ji, Erna and Theo Lillifeld, who were trustees at the time and helped set up the foundation, a man called Albion Patterson, an American who was also trustee, very learned man. Then Ruth Tetema, who went back, many years. And then there was Mary Zimbalist. And Mary did the recording on the Nagara recording and so on. And they're asking Krishna Ji about his past, Dr. Besant, the Theosophical Society, and they go into it at great length and depth, So, but Krishna Ji went along with that, consented to this inquiry into his personal life, And of course, from a certain angle, he also encouraged the writing of his biography, at least the first ones by, what's his name? Her name, Mary Lutyens. She wrote these 3 volumes. And well, what does all of that concern itself with, well, to some degree with the teachings, but, how can you explain the teachings other than, listening to them, and there you see it directly, immediately. And so normal people love seeking access to the personal life of this man. And of course, I must say, so did I. I was fascinated learning about him, that he was a human being. See, because at one point, when I first heard him in Zahn, Switzerland, which was in 1971, in the July, August there, and I thought, and I knew he lived in a nice chalet in Gstaad, near the Palace Hotel, with Mary Zimbalist and some other people. And I thought, what does the man do when he doesn't give a talk? And I thought, gosh, he must have a space, a private space there. And he sits in samadhi. And then he goes to the tent and talks to the people. Then he goes back and he's in samadhi, and maybe in between he eats something, Then somebody told me, who knew him a little bit better, they said, oh, didn't you know that Krishna Ji watches TV and he likes films? and for a moment I was shocked. I thought, no, come on, nah. And then I thought, wow, I have to find out more about this man, And I became very curious and I almost, I watched him and spied him when he went for a walk with Mrs. What's her name? Lillifeld and Zimbalist and some other people, friends. And it was a real revelation to see that he not only had preferences like that, but also read thrillers, mysteries, and enjoyed them, and said very clearly that he never read any holy scriptures, but he did read Agatha Christie and other such writers. So all of that gave a different perspective on this man who conveyed this extraordinary message of being a light to oneself, of finding the truth for oneself. And that, of course, I mean, for me, I remember, I mean, sorry to be personal, this is a very personal engagement and so on. But I remember hearing him at that time. He resided in Madras on Greenways Road with an architect lady called Yaya Lakshmi. And I was invited to this talk. And when he first entered the room, I was completely struck by his appearance. And then he walked to the corner where his pillow was with a microphone. And then his demeanor of quietly looking at people, before asking, what shall we talk about? And then it was like a window was opened to a field of infinity for me. It was like I don't know, it was a profound experience. And so there was always this kind of combination. And then learning more about his life, how, well, he was born in Madanapale, and there were Brahmins, but the mother died early, many kids. The father was not wealthy, he was a theosophist and so on. And then, then to learn that as a youngster, he had malaria for several years. He was ill with malaria, and all these kind of informations seem to strengthen the view that this was a true human being, but of the most extraordinary quality, and that communicated itself, and I felt that later when I had more contact with him, I mean, this man was unusual. And by the same token, I like to suggest that, yes, his way of living, how he was with the theosophist, with his brother, the brother died, Ohai, then, Oman, disbanding the Order of the Star and going totally independent. I mean, these were all extraordinary. I mean, particularly when I heard that, I got to tell you, when I heard that he had just decided to leave the Theosophical Society and return all these gifts and properties and monies, I thought, my God, that takes something for a man, for a human being to do that. That's incredible, And then later, I have to tell you this, later at the lunch table, we talked about all kinds of things, of course, variously. And on this particular occasion, we were talking about decision making. And Krishna ji sort of just so very casual, comment and said, "I've never made a decision in my life." And I said, "What, Krishna ji? But you disbanded the Order of the Star. Wasn't that a decision you made?" He said, "No, sir. It was inevitable." So yeah, and I mean, one could see his mind, his being, his consciousness operated in a very unusual manner, clearly, and one could, and then of course on, on other occasions, for example, he would talk at length what it was to have been the boy when he was younger in Madanapal, going to school and all that. And he described himself as very dreamy, almost morose, who was just watching nature and all that. And then a bit later, he said, well, my memory is not accurate. I don't have a good memory. I don't remember any of this. And I can only tell you about this because some people told me what I did. But then, of course, logically, I came to think, wait a minute, you don't remember what you did and what happened to you, but you remember what people told you about yourself. There's memory involved in that, right? Anyways, that seemed to be a slight contradiction, which of course, a lot of people who like to be critical of Krishnaji, they often bring up, oh yeah, he contradicts himself, he's not consistent. And of course, he's not a rational philosopher, He speaks very much on the moment, from the moment. And one can see that and experience it. Yeah. And then, of course, one of the things, the characteristics of Krishnaji as a speaker, which stood out, was particularly in his later life. But I read that he already did that early on when he was still almost a theosophist, when he said to people that listened to him, why haven't you changed? Why haven't you been transformed? And so on, And then later, of course, in his years here, in his 80s and so on, he said, oh, nobody understood me. Nobody really realized and did what I hinted at and pointed at. And even on his deathbed, he said that more or less, if you remember correctly. But anyways, here's something that I like to just read to you. It's another book, which is probably not so well known. And it's this book here. It's called The Quiet Mind by a man called John Coleman. And John Coleman was an American, and he lived and operated in Southeast Asia as a CIA spy. And on one occasion, he took a flight in India from, I don't know, Calcutta, I think, to Delhi and so on. And then he writes about that as a very important event in his life. And he sees this Indian man being followed by a whole number of people, friends, who wish him good luck, but he has no luggage. He enters the plane, and somehow this man, Coleman, gets to talk to him, and he's totally struck by what this man has to say and offer, because even though he's a CIA agent, being in Southeast Asia, he discovered Buddhism and all the different spiritual movements, so he was very intrigued by that, and it became the main activity in his life, And then he also went to see Krishnaji in Brockwood, at one time, and also saw him in Carmel, in California. He came specifically to Carmel, California, where he had these long conversations that he includes in this book. So here, let me read to you this little passage from the Quiet Mind. Here's a comment that Coleman makes about his friend Aldous Huxley. Aldous Huxley, at whose home he told me he stays sometimes, wrote, "There is a transcendent spontaneity of life, a creative reality which reveals itself as immanent only when the perceiver's mind is in a state of alert passivity, of choiceless awareness." And now we come to Krishnaji. Krishnamurti himself, when we met again 4 years later, showed me in simple terms how he saw this happening. And this, I think, is like a joke almost. Maybe this is what his presumably said. Maybe one day, while I'm delivering one of my talks in a tent or shelter, it will be raining outside, and someone walking down the street, someone who has never heard of me, will walk into the tent to get out of the rain. Perhaps in such a situation of spontaneity, that man will understand what I'm saying. So he makes he makes allowance for the man who walks into the tent out of the rain, never having heard from him. And well, I don't know, these personal stories about his life, whether they block our understanding or not, and only each one can only comment himself on this, Actually, then I don't know if this in any ways covers. Oh, here, I wanted to read you some poems of mine. And the first one is, I wrote it in Ojai in 1986, so that's the year that Krishnaji passed away. And I called it Funeral Oration on the 48th day in praise of K. 48 days after he passed. Surely nobody really knew you. You were and remained a mystery. Although you spoke many words, and many words were made about you, because you were the world, a beautiful world, rare and precious, resplendent with the perfume of insight and compassion. There was much guessing and conjecturing among us who you were and what. Would a simple answer have sufficed? Had we but listened, we might have discovered the mirror of your words, might have discovered ourselves and the vast and splendid emptiness that you kept pointing at. But we are grounded in words, and thoughts crowd us incessantly. Could we have seen that you are us and we are you? So, okay, maybe I'll go on for another few minutes before we go into questions. And this one here, it's a passage from the notebook, from that newer edition of the notebook, that material that was later found and added. And there's one passage that strikes me again and again whenever I read it. He's talking about a magnolia flower that he discovers it's sitting on the table, and somehow just somebody has thrown it down there. And he says, as it lay on the leaf, it was designed to contain the structure and color of the earth and heavens. And there was space within it, not the space that's measured, but it was endless. You saw it in a flash, a swiftness that the eye and the heart could not follow. It left you as empty as that space around that flower It was an explosion without the time fuse, and you were left marveling that such a thing should be. All this in a flash, in the twinkling of an eye, and therein lay the beauty of the everlasting. Beauty is the seeing the immediacy of the whole. You can see the immensity only in a flash, the whole of life in a fleeting second. It is not thought that sees. Thought is put together through time. When thought sees, it is within the field of time. And so there's continuity and decay follows. Age and sorrow set in. But it was there on the table, the flower and the leaf, waiting to be put in water if somebody cared. And so, I don't know if it answers that question, but I feel that Krishnaji's life, the way it unfolded, even though there was, as we well know, there was a lot of conflict, difficulty, and all that, but he maintained that momentary awareness throughout. And that was something totally marvelous, admirable, beautiful. And so, I don't know if I should read you this last. Okay, I'll read you. I'll read you this last poem. And it's called, and it's a poem of mine, not of Krishnaji's. And I called it Humanity and Us. Humanity is us. And in brackets, I described where I was conceiving this writing. Beneath the stars, with the gibbous moon in Gemini, coyotes howling not too far away, and the dry mountains of the Los Padres National Forest silent. We inhabit the cosmos, and yet we are lost souls. We live on the earth, and yet look for other planets like ours out there among the stars, just in case we destroy our habitat. And so we go out there into the interstellar and imaginary, full of knowledge deeply embedded in our brains, our hands busy with electronic devices, our eyes fixed on small screens and big screens, our dreams forever bubbling. But the universe is here, right here, in me, in all of us, in humanity and all around. That concludes my presentation. I don't know if it captured or answered anything, particularly in terms of the subject that I presented or that Mr. Dubey presented. So I don't know if we have time for questions or comments. Please do.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks a lot for taking us through the personal life of Krishnaji and sharing the experiences of many others. And of course, your poem was beautiful. Thanks a lot for that. May I request Professor Krishna to say a few words and then followed by Dr. Gajanan Rao and Harshji and Dr. Harshad Parekh, and then we can have questions. Professor Krishna, sir, unmute yourself. Sir, unmute. It's muted. Muted again, sir.
Wait a moment. I don't.
Yes, yes.
Am I?
Yes. Now it's all right.
Yes, yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, Michael. It was wonderful to hear your personal journey with Krishnamurti. It confirms to me that there is a great mystery about the man and the teaching, which nobody really knows about. I mean, I have tried to question Achurji and Upulji and Mary Zimbalist and people who were very close to him, and even they didn't seem to know. So you are right that nobody really knew Krishnamurti, at least not in the depths. As a person, we all knew him. The mystery begins right from his selection by Leadbeater. How does a moronic, sickly child get picked up and announced as a world teacher? Many people thought it was ridiculous, resigned and left the group. But Mrs. Besant had some divine inklings and she stuck to it. Although her reputation suffered a lot because of that, but she never gave up. And it so turns out that it turned out true. This man did become a world teacher.
Yeah.
We do think and deny what Mrs. Besant and Leadbeater had said about this boy. And Krishnaji himself said that are all not important. But he didn't deny all that happening. And he had all these occult powers which Leadbeater and Annie Besant also had. But he said that that's not central. That's not what leads to spirituality. It's just another form of power. But he did have that. And when he was asked that you learned from people like Leadbeater and Annie Besant, and you met the masters and so on and got messages, he didn't deny it. He said, yes, all that happened. But all that is not necessary. I went the long way to come where I am, but you don't have to go that way. There is a direct, short route, which is his teaching. Through self-knowledge, you can get there. But it's also true that nobody really understood what he was trying to convey at the depth at which he was speaking. We all understood at our own level, at our own, the depth which we ourselves are capable of. I mean, I remember his words on his deathbed saying, I am surrounded by people who have not the foggiest notion what I am talking about. I could only say, it was true, it was true. And all of us trustees were around in that place. I could only say, I'm sorry, sir. What do you say otherwise? Because it was true about all of us. So there is a great mystery. And he also says that it's not my teaching. I have not thought out the teaching. It comes to me, musicians and other scientists and so on have spoken of through the ages. that the truth is somewhere there, out there. And when the mind is empty, it comes to you. I think it was Mozart, if I'm right, who said, I don't compose my music. I just sit there and tune my mind, and it all flows through me. And it's something like that that Krishnaji was going through. And then doubt was cast when he was sick and dying, that energy had left him, that the body was just lying. And when he was asked, he said, no, sir, the world teacher is still here. He will be here until I am here. I know this because I have all these wonderful dreams. No, not dreams, whatever it is that happens at night. So he was relying on evidence that it was still operating within him. And then he made that February 7 tape where he said that an enormous intelligence and energy has used this body, and nobody knows what this is. So he also acknowledged the mystery. I doubt whether even he knew what was going on, because he was asked several times, but he did say to me on the deathbed, sir, there are things I am not permitted to tell. Now, who is not permitting him to tell? It sounded very much like when the masters gave him initiations and so on. They probably extracted a vow from him that he would be silent on certain issues. I'm guessing that's not what he said. What he said were only those words. I'm not permitted to tell certain things which I'm not permitted to tell. So the mystery continues, and we really don't know what went on through this man. But I agree with you that whatever went on, it was extraordinary. And he said that though he went through all this, it is not necessary for us to go through all this. We can come to it perhaps. He said perhaps, if we could leave the teaching. Even that, he's not giving you a guarantee. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Dr. Gajanan Rao, would you like to say something, sir?
I'll try. Yeah, I'm unmuted. I'm sure I'm being heard.
Yes.
Yes, you are being heard.
Yes, sir. Good morning, Michael, sir.
No.
I had known you through your Kitchen Chronicles long time ago. And that book never remains in my almirah. Somebody steals it for some time till I go and recover it. Such an interesting book. I always wondered, in spite of all that, the inquisitiveness in you, curiosity to know what he is, you chose to be the cook, the chef, and a great chef at that. Well, sir, I want to say this, very much agree with Krishna when he said, who is this man? What is this man? Is a great puzzle for all of us. And when he says, so the teaching is so simple. The essence of it is so simple that you don't catch it. That is again is the worst puzzle. So I have come to more or less not a conclusion, an idea that maybe something tremendous should happen, like a storm in oneself, to be able to transform the way he wanted us. As Krishna again said, nobody has transformed. Maybe, we don't know. We don't know. When Krishnaji was quoted this, you don't know, sir, there may be a few who were transformed. Even out of the children who went out to schools. But he said, no, that person will show. So there was this, that there couldn't be some transformed person hidden somewhere. Like Krishnaji himself showed right on the beach, before anything happened to him at all. Some clairvoyant showed that he is a man. Material was tomorrow's to become a world teacher. So when one can question, is it then, sorry, this question is rather critical, is it worthwhile putting all the energy into a man's teaching which you don't understand fully, in the sense it has to be understood fully. But then I don't give so much credence to transformation. I'm not saying I'm realized or something, not at all. Nobody would say that. And I'm still saying it has given you many questions on your own life. So I don't want to say it made a better man of you. Certainly not. You can always be square one anytime. But I can't also deny that I had nothing to you. The teaching did nothing to you. Hundreds, thousands, millions have followed him. And including the man who went with him in Calcutta to somewhere. He found some spark in him anywhere. As you said, Krishna is again a big a signal to me. There was a presence of his when he got out of the car. It wasn't the Vihar coming from the Shivali or somewhere, and he showed to people, and people are waiting to see. Suddenly a presence in Vasanta Vihar, which he had never felt earlier. As he was taking a leave of us, so sad it was at Vasanta Vihar. And even saying funnily, what are you waiting for? To say farewell to me? Who knows I'll come back? Who knows I might come back? So this was a man who was not inconsistent, but a puzzle. Because inconsistency is what we think he is, but from the beginning to the end of the day, there has been a certain consistency, certain rock-like consistency in him, giving the same words to us. What are you doing to yourself? So this question itself is enough to shake Mr. Michael to a question which will keep, when kept alive, is answering 1,000 questions in us, our life, our profession, our future, our relationship. Everything seems to have some change, not claiming it as some achievement, but there is the life and flow is somewhat easier with the content of the teaching, somewhat understood. I'm not claiming anything there, I'm just saying that. So I wouldn't go on because it's a very difficult subject. I was going to think as to how Michael G is going to bring to tell us that he is a teaching. The teaching is this man. Because he often said, if somebody else unlike me, or what, he didn't say unlike me, some vagabond say, has talked all this to you, would you ever listen? Or you would have set it aside trash. But there was a little inconsistency, right? But then he also said, when somebody comes and asks you from Seattle, who is this man, what kind of person was he, who said all this, what would you answer? Would you say he had nothing to do with his teachings? Or he's a different man altogether? No. So he said, I come here to Buddha's place and say, what was Buddha like? So like Michael Krohnen narrated, we have a kind of a right, not only right, but an obligation, whoever has been with him, to narrate what this man was, in a way, what he was like, what did he say, how did he walk, how did he eat. Everything was pleasure to look at him. The way he walked, the way he ate, the way he conversed with people, the way he sat on the dais, and a daredevil, he could face anything of a question. Offhand, there's no preparation needed. So we had a great Himalayan person with us who is no more. And according to his own thing, it may take 2000 years maybe for a man like that to come. But in the meantime, my only small wonder is whether, as I said earlier, a process is denies, as Krishna himself said, you can just, by self-knowledge, you can get it. By going deeply into yourself, probably you will know what is the truth of the matter. But then I have always doubted going through all the process and coming into the paper tree, the divine music, and he's saying, I am everything, that grasses me and all that. Does it require such a knock on the brain to turn and be transformed? Or are we imagining we can do that simply? A question which some of you may answer. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Very well said. Harshji, would you like to say something, sir?
Yes. First, of course, thank you, Michael, for, I would call it, having the courage to talk about Krishnaji in a personal way.
Yeah.
Because having also been with Krishnaji quite a lot in a variety of contexts, not just the teachings and personal ways as well. There is a lot. I was thinking what I could say, and it would take years for me to say what I could say. But I was minded by Krishnaji in the last year of his life. He spent a lot of time talking to some people close to him, including me. And he was putting this question to us all the time, the one about the man in Seattle, but he was now putting it especially to us. People will say to you, you have been close to Krishnamurti. Tell me about him. What are you going to tell them about me? And of course, Hollywood films could be made about his life. Rather, Schloss has written a book about his sex life, which is, what are you going to point to? What are you going to focus on? What are you going to, how are you going to convey to them what is important? And he was specifically talking about, if we can call it a project, his commitment to the transformation of human consciousness, because that is what he was setting out to do. And he was saying, well, I'm gone, but it's in your hands. Do you just give up? Or do you? And what was being said about whether there will be this intelligence or the sacred or whatever was focused and seemed to be transmitted through one person, Krishnamurti, whether there would be another person or to which he was very clear that there wouldn't be, not for centuries, there wouldn't be. But he also said that by holding this inquiry into whether human beings can change, and the whole human being, because it's something that we see ourselves as too separate. We see ourselves as individual little bits, but we really partake of human consciousness and how this human consciousness can change. That would be the key question. How can this drive in humanity survive and be supported by all of us who have had some sense of it. So whatever I say is sort of from that standpoint, and not interesting personal anecdotes, or which are also interesting. I'm not saying that they shouldn't be around, but so this question of the mystery, we have to be careful not to make it too mysterious, because if it gets settled in our mind, nobody has understood, it's a mystery and so on, we begin to almost shut it out and deny it, and deny the possibility of a contact with this. So I will say this, that as many people around him have reported, Popal Jaka Harshadji talks about it, there is a point at which you see. This is the only way to talk about it. You see the whole, you see it. And especially if you have been in his presence, I mean, and then it's not a mystery at that moment, because you are seeing what it is. But how that is going to express itself in your life, because when you see it, you're still the person you are. You're still, if you're a scientist, you're doing research, you have to go to work the next day. You can't suddenly, you can't suddenly change after that. You're still that you are at that moment. So the question is whether from that point, as Krishnamurti says, instead of going north, you go south or south, in whichever way he says it. The question is, will your future actions, slowly your paths will begin to diverge if you had not had this realization, then your choices you would make in your life would be different. And yet you're still stuck. I mean, sorry, I'm fighting a court case with the government at the moment. It's there. Do I just drop it? No, because too many people are involved. I can't just evade my responsibilities. But how do I proceed from moment to moment? So I think that we shouldn't be looking for this. There is a sense in which it is instantaneous, but there is also a sense in which, when he says, the first step is the last step, that once you take the first step, then your life has to move from that point, and it will not move in some dramatically different way. It will slowly diverge, and you don't know where it will take you. And you can't also be absolutely clear that every single thing all the time you are in a state where you are in touch with intelligence, so that you're taking intelligent action all the time. Yeah. Some things can overwhelm you, but that is the inquiry. When anger or violence begins to overwhelm you, that through the intelligence, you study, you understand it, you understand what is happening to you, why there is anger, what is the root. This is the understanding of the self that he is talking about. So every relationship that you have, you will find yourself reflected in that. You will find, violence and hate, and it's an open question that what is love in this situation, in this relationship? How do you express? Not in the cinematic way of I love you all the time and this and that and hugs and sentimentality, though all that's there. I mean, that's the life we're in. But how will deep love express itself? So that remains the challenge. The way. And also Krishnamurti, where are we with Krishnamurti? So one of the things that concerns me is that what you see on YouTube, what you read in the books, which are mainly, apart from a few writings of his, they are mainly transcripts of his speaking at a particular moment in time, in whatever was relevant in the world, problems between Russia and so on. Computers, sometimes he talks about, because computers are becoming more and more prevalent. So they relate always to that, as Michael said, it's in that moment that he is speaking in response to whatever is happening at that moment. It's not a thought out. He is, in a way, surveying the scene that is laid out in front of him, the whole of humanity and the whole of human consciousness. And nobody is ever going to be able to encompass the whole of what they see, even us. I mean, look, you're sitting there, you see everything around you. Can you describe everything around you just now in a few words? You can't. And so Krishnamurti is in that situation. He's seeing, but words are limited, and he is trying his best to point to what, so that perhaps you will look yourself. He's never trying to replace that. So, and he's saying, you look. And here are some pointers. Look in this direction, look in that direction. See what you see, but see for yourself, because nobody else will ever tell you about the wholeness of life. Nobody else will ever tell you that, even if they see it. And if you see it, you will never be able necessarily to communicate to anybody that this is the way things are. And you can only do it with whatever resources you yourself have at that moment in time. Maybe it'll develop, maybe this, you can only say what you can say of what you're seeing. So, having said that, I would like also just to say a few things on a personal level. As I was saying, we actually don't know very much of what happened, what he was like every day. And so we build this picture of Krishnamurti as this great wise person sitting on the stage, talking to all of us. Can't avoid it. And worse than that, we see little excerpts of him talking about love, 20 minutes on love, right? On YouTube. But that's too little. What he's talking about is vast. So we actually get a very brief glimpse of Krishnamurti. Not even enough for the teachings. But to talk personally, so I knew him as a friend. If you ask me what Krishnamurti was, I would say he was a friend. And I could talk to him. Fortunately for me, for some reason, he was open. You know, a lot of people would try and talk with him and he wouldn't. But he did say, come and talk anytime you want to. So when we talk about my marriage, when I was having problems, we talked about everything, my health. And I've never said this to anybody ever before, because once again, people want to see Krishnamurti as different, as somebody great, as somebody to worship, or somebody, this amazing person over there. And that distances you from the possibility of that kind, because in your mind you're saying, well, it was all right for him, he could see all those things, but I can't, or it's going to be difficult for me. So for that reason, I don't see, it's a great thing to make too much of what he was like, if that is going to unconsciously even distance ourselves from the possibility that we can also see. So, but I had asthma. So he said, come, let me try. Now, very few people have talked about this, of Krishnamurti as a healer, but I went, saw him every day for about a couple of weeks, and he would lay his hand on my chest. Now I don't have asthma. And it's very interesting, because what happened was that I could see that the asthma, just by being near him, it wasn't some magic thing. I could see that the asthma, part of it was physical, some weakness in the lungs. But as everybody actually knows, asthma is a psychosomatic thing. That most of it was when I couldn't breathe as well as I could, that I would panic, that my muscles would contract and go into spasm, and that would make the breathing even more difficult. So most of it was psychological. And the psychological part disappeared. So to this day, I have, even now, you'll hear me coughing and so on, because there's a little bit of congestion, but it never bothers me. It never turns into an asthma attack. It never turns into, because that fear isn't there. That, and that's fear of death. That's what it is. That's disappeared, right? So it did work on the psychological level. But I'm saying this also to say that, yes, to be near him did put you into an altered state of consciousness. I'm sure Michael will attest to that, right? Which we are hesitant to talk about, all of us. Also because people today are not in a position to be near him. So what's the point? Saying, yes, I was near him and I could experience something that sorry, you guys are not in a position to experience at all. It's not, but it's just worth saying it every now and then, just to recognize that people, for me, what it did, I mean, this is just one instance. Now I can recall any number of experiences where it was absolutely real. Absolutely, and just walking next to him when the whole world was there. And it's just, and you were seeing it, and he knew you were seeing it, and you could look at him, and you'd look at you, and he knew you were seeing the world like that. And it was very amusing. It was on the beach, at the Adyar beach. I went for a walk with him, and it happened to be full moon day. And this beach runs north to south. This means that as you walk along, and it was exactly sunset time. Now, if you know, at full moon, the moon is directly opposite the sun. So the moon was rising out of the sea, and the sun was setting on the land. And I was aware of this whole thing, and the moon was cool, and there was water and clouds. It was like the elements of the earth. So it was, the four elements. It was water and air to the left of me. But to the right, this blazing sunset was setting over the land. So there was fire and earth on the right of me. And there were the villages, their huts. And you could be completely aware of their life, the life they lived. In that instant you're talking about. The life they lived. They went out on the sea, they risked their lives in the ocean, the storms, all of that was available. A plane was flying overhead, and they were completely aware there were people there having their the whole activity of the world was the traffic on the road which runs parallel to the, the whole world was there, laid out. And also in this deep mystical way too, like the earth, air, fire, water, the dynamics between people, the relationships, the fighting, the fears. It was all there. It was all there. And yet we were just walking along the beach and Krishnaji knew that, that I was also experiencing this, and that now he didn't say anything. But in that part, because there is a fisherman's village along the there, and the fishermen don't have anywhere to go to the bathroom. So they come out onto the beach and then they defecate on the beach. So you have to be careful walking along. This. So seeing this, Krishnaji was pointing out, making sure that I didn't step in any of this. And I thought, Krishnaji is saying, don't get so caught up in this that you don't notice and you step into the rubbish. That is, but it's, it's difficult to describe. It's difficult for me to say just how much communication on a non-verbal level was passing between Krishnaji and myself at that time. So this is just an example of how he was saying, watch out, you still have to walk in the world. Even if you're seeing things like this, you still have to deal with the problems of the world. You still don't get so lost in this. But despite all of this, you're still walking on a beach and there's rubbish there and you have to watch your step and you have to find your path. You have to, so yes, you can. And at that point, I would say there wasn't a mystery. But now, if you ask me, what can I say? I've said what I can say just now, but whether it conveys the reality of that moment, I know it doesn't. You would have to experience that for yourself to be able to see. So I think it's better if I say, yes, it's a mystery. And yet it isn't. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Harshji.
Yeah.
Thank you, Harshji. I think our time is almost up, but we'll extend it by 10 minutes and let Dr. Harshad Parekh take about 5 minutes, and then we'll have a question from Dinesh Waghmare. Harshad bhai.
Are you able to hear my voice? Hello?
Yes, you are. Yes.
Yeah, okay. Good morning, friends. Today's topic, Krishnamurti's life and work, are they connected? I would say yes, very much connected. And it is like asking whether our body and mind are they connected or not. So I feel that Krishnaji was learning from life every moment. And what he was learning, he was speaking about it. But apart from that, there was a mystery also. And I have experienced it sometimes, this mystery and personal presence. But for us, the teachings are very, very important. because when I first came to a book of Krishnamurti and what he was saying, I could really see the truth of what he was saying. And I felt that, yes, this man, what he says is right. He has really examined everything, the whole human mind. So apart from this, apart from saying that Krishnamurti was enlightened, was in touch with himself, but it seems to me that it doesn't mean that his actions will be perfect in every relationship. So I feel that a person who has understood himself very well, even then he can be in conflict sometimes, he can be angry and he can have problems. And I know that many people I knew, they had problems with Krishnaji and Krishnaji was angry with them. So that kind of thing, and even when we read the biography of Krishnamurti, we see that he was like a human being like us in many ways. Apart from being enlightened and speaking so clearly. So that is what I want to say, that for us, the mystery is not very important. Important is what he has said, and we can also feel some mystery about life, about ourselves, what is happening, and our life can become very happy, healthy, creative every day. Okay, I finished. Thank you.
Thank you, Harshad Bhai. Yes, Mr. Dinesh ji, please go ahead and ask your question.
Michael sir, are you able to listen to me?
Oh, yeah, I can hear you. Mhm.
Sir, when you asked Krishnamurti about his clarity about the inner intelligence and presence and all the rest of it, he said that it took years for the development. But in his teachings, he said that this transformation will be instantaneous. So, about what your views and your experience and your statement on this contradiction?
Well, I think that the important point is that an insight, a vision occurs for that instant, just that instant. You know, as he describes in the notebook, he sees in the flower everything, the whole universe and the emptiness and joy and all that. So I don't know if that answers your question or not.
I think we'll take the last question now, Mr. Pradeep Verma. Verma sahab,
Yes, sir.
bole.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Michael, sir, for giving us such a beautiful things about Krishnamurti. For me, life is as big as cosmos or the source. Not only JK's, but everyone's life and work are inseparably connected before someone judges through his limited brain. It is unfortunate that life has been divided into biology, psychology, philosophy, etc. Even time has been divided. These are, I'm telling certain observations. You are the world is true, at least in one sense, because everybody is suffering. Still, each individual has to look into his own life and his suffering. Nobody can give that magic wand to you. So each carries his own world or rock like Sisyphus. To set everyone, every human unconditionally free. Word is not the thing he emphasized. All his words became hot topics for discussions. Waghmare has already pointed out that slow clarification happened to JK, but you mentioned that you can see immensity only in a flash. I could understand that point pretty clearly. One personal question to Michael: what stone you are wearing in your ring figure? Ring.
That's a question often asked, and it's very simple. It actually used to be my mother's ring.
Oh,
Yeah, and I inherited it, and I had to open it to wear it, and it's lapis lazuli in silver setting. Lapis lazuli.
lapis lazuli.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you. Everybody, yes.
I think, Michael, there is one more question from Durga
Oh,
ji. So that will
okay.
be the last one. Yes.
All right
Durga,
then.
go ahead.
Yes. Good morning, Mr. Michael. Yeah, it's. I thought I just shouldn't leave the meeting, and thank you, Dinesh, for giving me the, last one moment to speak to Mr. Michael, because I just want to thank you, sir, for bringing in such a beautiful session. I interacted with you last time also when you attended here. And you not only brought the mystical and, the divine quality of the Krishnaji, which is often not the case. And not only that, you something got rubbed on us also. Even Mr. Harshad Parekh, Mr. Professor Krishna and Gajanan Rao, all of them also, they shared that intimate experiences with Krishnaji, rubbed on us, though we were not so privileged and blessed human beings, to have remained in that, in the, to be able to spend time in his presence. And just one small personal comment, if I can say, you are looking a bit, I don't know, looking a bit tired and looking a bit, lost your weight or something compared to your last time. That was a concern for me, because I just want to, I should aid my feelings. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Durga ji. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I think we can close the session now. And Durga ji, you'll see Michael again. This is not the last question that you're asking. I think you'll get more chances to ask questions. And I want to thank Michael once again for being with us. And thank you to all the participants for being present today. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Please declare next lecture. Please declare next lecture of Professor Krishna.
Next Sunday, we have Professor Krishna talking about his own journey of seeking truth along with Krishnamurti's teachings. So you're all welcome to join at 11 a.m. next Sunday. Thank you. I'll send the link to Michael also in case he wants to join. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Guest speaker is already invited. Please do come.
Thank you.
Please do come. Thank you very much. Thanks to everybody. Kamlesh, you may please